Hamas has won this war. It's over already. I mean, there's going to be a lot of fighting. I know people are going, Scott, what do you mean it's over? The Israelis are still in Gaza. They're still. When Israel sets the bar of their victory as the total elimination of Hamas politically and militarily, they lost the war right there. The moment they said that, they lost the war, because this is an unattainable objective, meaning that anything that's less than that means Hamas won by default. But Hamas isn't just winning by default. They're winning by beating the Israelis. They're beating them on the ground in Gaza. Yeah, I know Israel has some forces on the surface. Hamas is running amok below the ground, and they're inflicting unbearable casualties on the Israelis. Israel is taking a beating on the ground in Gaza. And they're taking a beating politically because of this, because they can't win this fight. The world has turned against Israel. The world is saying, we're done with you, Israel. We demand a ceasefire. And the longer Israel continues to refuse to allow this ceasefire, the worse off their political defeat will be. Hamas on October 7th launched an extraordinarily sophisticated and effective assault on the Gaza defense belt, overwhelming the defenses, slaughtering the defenders, penetrating the defensive barriers, and closing in on well-defined objectives, which were attacked and in many cases captured. It wasn't just hostages that that Hamas brought back into Gaza. It was computer servers. It was documents. It was troves of information about Israeli intelligence, Israeli operations, Israeli capabilities that the Hamas has brought back. I bring this up because this is an attack that was in planning for more than a year. It was executed very well, and then Hamas fell back on prepared defenses. Hamas knows what Israel's capable of. Hamas knows that Israel will use bombs to attack the Palestinian population. Hamas knows that eventually Israel will have to go after the tunnels. So when Hamas constructed these tunnels, do you really think they said, let's make them all connected so that if you find one and you pump salt water into it, everybody drowns? That's a good defensive tactic. Why don't we do that? Or could they have built tunnel systems that are cellular in nature, that can be cut off from one another, isolated, so that if one cell is captured or disrupted, it can be sealed off, much like you do with a ship's compartments. Torpedo hits the ship, you seal off the affected compartments, flood them, the ship stays afloat. That's how the Hamas tunnel network has been designed. And, so the Israelis are just wasting their time. There's some people who believe that they will further, destroy an already extraordinarily saline aquifer in Gaza by doing this. That has yet to be seen. I don't doubt that outcome, but I'm not going to predict the future on that. But what I can say is that there's no way that Hamas spent all this time and effort building a tunnel network, the solution to which is to simply flood it with salt water. I just don't believe that what the Israelis are doing is going to have any meaningful impact on this battle. It just shows the level of desperation that the Israelis are at, because they can't get into these tunnels. They've tried. They have special units of tunnel rats who've gone down there and gotten slaughtered. They tried to rescue a hostage the other day by going into the tunnels with elite forces. Didn't end well for the elite forces. And so rather than continue to bang their head against this wall, they're now saying, well, we're going to pump salt water in, but it isn't going to solve the problem. Hamas's tunnel network has been designed to withstand everything Israel can throw at it. Remember, Hamas knew Israel was coming into Gaza. That was the whole purpose of taking the hostages, to suck Israel into a trap. So Hamas has been preparing for exactly what's happening right now. They've anticipated everything. These guys are sophisticated. These guys are good. They know the Israelis better than the Israelis know themselves in many cases. Just ask the people who saw the intelligence documents carried by the Hamas assaulters on October 7th, the schematics, the maps with absolutely accurate intelligence about everything that was happening on the Israeli side. We don't underestimate these guys. What Hamas is executing right now is one of the most sophisticated and well-planned operations in modern history. Israel, on the other hand, had lost everything on October 7th. Everything. All their intelligence was gone. Hamas wiped the slate clean. So Israel is now going into Gaza blind. They have to create new intelligence, which means that they have no intelligence. I know, I used to be an intelligence officer. You don't create these networks overnight. So instead, they're relying on assessments. And many of these assessments are emotionally driven assessments, driven by revenge, not by operational necessity. Political pressure is being put on the IDF to exact a toll. And so you can't find Hamas. So the toll instead is exacted from the population. And that's what's going on right now. Collective punishment, genocidal-like behavior by the Israelis towards the Palestinian people. And let's just be honest. This was all predictable, meaning that Hamas knew this was going to happen. Hamas, I can't say wanted this to happen, but they knew that this was going to happen, and it was part of their strategy. You see, to defeat Israel isn't just about beating them in the tunnels. It's about beating them politically. And since Hamas knew how Israel was going to respond, Hamas now knew that the sacrifice of the Palestinian people would generate global outrage to get the world to turn on Israel. And that's happening right now as we speak.
Yeah.
I don't think this conflict will escalate. It's a very dangerous situation, so it could escalate. But literally everybody involved doesn't want escalation because they understand the consequences of escalation. It would be devastating for everybody involved, especially Israel, which could be facing strategic defeat, not just political defeat, but strategic defeat for the first time in its history. Israel is confronted with the reality of their failures, their collective failures. They were so close to getting strategic victory. What I mean by that is the Abrams Accords that had been negotiated and put in place by Donald Trump had basically radically transformed the entire region. For the Abrams Accord basically was the death knell of a Palestinian statehood. Put the Palestinian body in a coffin. They were nailing the coffin shut, and they had the hole dug. They were just going to put the body in the hole. It was over. In its place, Israel was starting to normalize relations with the Gulf Arab states. They had already normalized relations with, Bahrain, with the United Arab Emirates, and they were on the cusp of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia. And then they finalized that. Basically, that was it. Look, Joe Biden, when he was at the G20 summit in India, had said, here's the vision of the future, the India Middle East Economic Corridor. And, he said, look, we're going to be able to put cargo ships, cargo containers on a ship in Mumbai and ship it into, Dubai. And then we're going to put it on a train in the United Arab Emirates, and that train's going to transit into Saudi Arabia, into Jordan, across into Israel. Imagine that, a train going from the United Arab Emirates through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, into Israel, where those goods will be put on another ship and sent into a port in Greece. And now you have connectivity from India to Europe, this great thing where Israel is a linchpin. It wasn't just Joe Biden's fanciful imagination. Benjamin Netanyahu himself, when he addressed the General Assembly in September, bragged about the same thing. He said, this is the new reality. Israel now is a major economic player on the world stage. That's where everybody was going. That's what everybody was focused on. And by focusing on that, it would empower this far-right coalition who would, if this all succeeded, be seen as, reviving the Israeli economic engine, diverting public attention away from, Benjamin Netanyahu rewriting basic laws so that he couldn't be prosecuted for corruption charges. Nobody wanted to talk about that. They're all going to talk about this wonderful economic prosperity. All changed on October 7th. That corridor is dead. Nobody's talking about it. Saudi Arabia is not going to normalize relations with Israel right now, not without a Palestinian state. Everybody's talking about a Palestinian state, and this is the reality that the world has fundamentally changed for Israel. Literally it's game over for Israel, and this is the new reality that the world is waking up to. That Israel, as it currently exists, is incompatible with international values, international norms and standards. Even the United States, who's vetoing these ceasefire resolutions, recognizes that Benjamin Netanyahu has got to go, that this ruling coalition cannot stay in power. Biden himself has said that there will be a Palestinian state. There will be a Palestinian state, which means that anything Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping for is now irrelevant, because Israel can't do anything without American support. That's the other reality here, that Israel can't survive without America. But just about everything Israel says about Hamas is a lie. First of all, the bodies you see dragged before the camera are civilians. The Israelis themselves acknowledge that 80 to 85% of the men that they stripped down were civilians. They weren't Hamas. And the Israeli definition of Hamas is very liberal, meaning anybody who is doing anything that could potentially be seen as supporting the Hamas war effort is now Hamas. What you're not seeing there is the Al-Qassam Brigade. You're not seeing the Al-Quds Brigade. You're not seeing the hardline fighters. They don't surrender. We're not seeing hardcore Hamas fighters surrender. They're underground executing a plan that they've been, that they've prepared for many years. So this, again, is just Israeli propaganda. And the Israelis have to do this. Let's understand what's happening right now in Israel. Not only is the Israeli public waking up to the fact that they're not winning in Gaza. I mean, the Golani Brigade's just getting slapped around like a little kid by Hamas. And that's their elite infantry unit, and they're just getting beat up, bad, pummeled. But the Israelis are also waking up to that everything the government has told them about October 7th was a lie. There's no beheaded babies. There's no burned babies. There's no rape. There's none of this. None of this happened. But the concept of widespread mayhem, rape, murder, 1,200 Israelis slaughtered by the evil Hamas. Well, first of all, fully a third of those were soldiers killed in battle. Now we take the remaining number, and it's turned out the Israelis themselves have said, we probably killed the vast majority of them, but we're not going to have an investigation because that would just be too damaging to the psychology of Israel to understand what we did on that day. What they did on that day is kill everybody because they were panicked. Don't ever believe that Hamas slaughtered all those people at the rave, because even the survivors of the rave were saying, no. There was a crossfire. The Israeli police were just shooting us as we ran to them. They were killing us. Apache helicopters were in the air. The pilots saying, we can't discriminate. We're just shooting everybody. The worst one was when where a very large number of people died were in the kibbutzes themselves, holed up in their homes. And the Israeli armor came in, and rather than negotiate or wait, they just blew up all the homes, burning the Israelis that were there alive. The Israeli Defense Forces now admitted just the vast majority of the people killed. I'm not saying Hamas didn't kill anybody. Of course they did. But the idea that Hamas went in and slaughtered 1,200 innocent Israeli civilians, no, not even close. The bottom line is the whole narrative that Israel painted about October 7th is turning out to be an absolute giant lie. And the Israeli public is waking up to this. So in order to divert their attention from this, the IDF is carrying out these massive, propaganda things to generate hatred in the hearts and minds of the Israeli public, who are also being told very difficult things, such as the Hamas actually treated the hostages like humans, treated them as well as the conditions could prevail, that if a hostage died, they died because of Israeli bombs, not because of what Hamas did to them. Meanwhile, the Palestinians being released from Israeli prison, they're talking about rape, torture, and ongoing brutalization. So the Israeli public is waking up to this reality that they suck as a nation. And that's the reality of modern day Israel. They suck. They're not good people. They don't have a good cause. They're racist as hell. They believe in the supremacy of Jews over everybody. And they're willing to, demean, to dehumanize the Arab men to make themselves feel better about their own failings. That's what's going on. This strategic defeat of Israel isn't just military. It isn't just economic. It's the defeat of the mindset of Zionism. It's the absolute delegitimization of political Zionism. And when that gets defeated, and it's happening or already happened, that's the end of Israel as we know it. That doesn't mean Israel ceases to exist, but what it means is that politicians like Benjamin Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition will never again have a chance to rule, that somebody's going to have to come in and take the reins and work with the international community so that, instead of a one-state solution where the Jews are overwhelmed by, the majority of Muslims and Christians that live in Palestine, that there will be a two-state solution where the concept of a Jewish separate state still exists, because that's becoming more difficult to defend. The concept of a separate Jewish state, it's becoming more difficult to defend. And the longer this goes on, the harder it is going to be able to implement something like that.